Please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Send it to Dan. Dan. Oh, that, how would you, never, oh, yeah, not bad idea. Morning, Moines County Board of Supervisors, October 13th, 2020. Are there any changes to the tentative agenda?
I have none.
I have none. We have an agenda, meet with department heads, elected officials. Terry Johnson, Des Moines County Auditor.
How many more weeks before I'm silent?
We don't ever want you to be silent, Terry.
Well, I just want you be
But
quiet.
we're talking to you about that's a different issue.
Okay, I'll announce that so far we have sent out 9,111 ballots. 3,760 of those have been received, so.
3,000 what?
3,760 have been received so far. Of course, yesterday we didn't have mail, so we don't know what today's gonna be like with all of the ballots coming back. I know there has been issues, I guess, on the news, and I got several emails over the weekend and during the week about the secrecy sleeves, the secrecy envelopes. Because there must be a big issue, some states it has to be in there and all of that, and that's something that, that is something that we have never provided. It's an option, and our instructions even state that if a secrecy envelope was provided, which we don't, so your ballot goes directly in the envelope. So, you know, I know we've had questions, you know, is my vote gonna count, is my ballot gonna count because there wasn't a secrecy envelope? Yes, it's gonna count. The only reason it wouldn't count is if you didn't sign the yellow line on your affidavit envelope, or if you didn't get it returned here in time. So, and then for people voting absentee at the counter, I need to remind everybody that you cannot leave with your ballot. It has to be voted here and left here. It's been so busy out in the hallway, and now we've got a box down here for people to drop their ballots in, and there's been at least one, possibly two. I think they end up returning them, but I think they can take them home with them, and you can't. So we are busy tracking down one of them. Absentee, and just to let everybody know, because a lot of people, they're mailed an absentee ballot, but they want to go to the poll, and I just want to let them know that they're all the same ballots. The absentee ballots are not any different than the ballots that you have at the precincts. So I don't know if people think they're different, and those ballots get counted on election day, not the day after, only those that come in afterwards, but a majority of them, most of them, will be counted on election.
They just need to be postmarked by election day.
Yep, they just need to be postmarked, so every absentee ballot that we receive by election day will be counted on election day.
What, and I remember several years ago, ballots were coming in with no postmarks.
Yes, that was an issue because the post office didn't always do a cancellation mark on them.
Yeah.
So if there was no postmark on them, we didn't know when they were dropped in the mail,
Yeah.
so they weren't counted. And now we're required to have this IMB, intelligent marking ballot, I don't know what it is, but we have to order special envelopes now that have all this coding on them, so then that way, when somebody dumps their ballot into the system and through the mail, it gets scanned in so that we know when it reached the facility up there, when it went back out, and when it came down here. Because usually a ballot will have 2 or 3 coatings on it. Every day we have to go and dump and download this file from the post office that tells us what ballots were started through the system on what day.
So in other words, so it tells you.
So if a
Stamped by
ballot,
the
yeah, so if a
election day.
ballot doesn't have a cancellation date on it, we can go back through the Excel file, find that ballot coding on it, because when the ballot comes, there's a number on the front, but then there's also a scan down at the bottom. And so we look at that that ballot number, and we look to see when it was dumped into the system and whether we can receive it or not. So that was another requirement that we do now, so. So that's additional step there. And I also want to let everybody know that those that have absentees mailed to them, if they want to, they can bring them down here and vote them and leave them here. They don't have to get a new ballot. They can bring it here, they can vote it here, and they can drop it off here. Or they can vote it at home and drop it off here, so there's lots of options out there. So
You say you had 3,000 of them come back,
we've had 3,760 received back already.
and how many have come through the voting in person?
The voting in person, I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but I think just because we've been at it for, what, a week now? And it's probably between three and 400, I think.
Oh,
Because there's a couple of days in there that we were well over 100. It might be close to 500, so. And we've had lots of people dropping their ballots off in the drop box outside, so.
good, big election.
Yes, it is. So I will be quiet now.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Colin Gerst, IT.
I just keep busy like always, nothing new to report.
Brian Carter, Secondary Roads.
Good morning. Stars Cave is open. They're still picking some stuff up around there, but that project is done. I actually haven't been there since it was completed, but traffic's using it and all's well, so thank you to everybody for their patience during that. It was a bit of a cluster right there. It's a bad spot to have to work down at the bottom of that hill and everything else, but it went well. I want to mention, I'll mention this every week, just to make it out there, but we are going to close Highway 99 coming up, and I'm going to send some letters out here this week. We're having a pre-construction meeting coming up and everything else, but we've been talking about this for so long. I think a lot of people have heard it. I had a guy call a couple weeks ago, and he just simply wanted to know what year it actually was.
Did you tell him 2020?
That's a reasonable question, because we've been talking about this for a long time. So it is going to be this year. It will be a full closure for the bridge replacement. It was really our only option. I've had a few people ask why we didn't do something different, and with all the wetlands and the environmental issues there, we pretty much had to stay right where we were at. We looked at other options actually, and we're pretty much told no, and a couple other things. So it'll be a good project, but it will be an extensive project. We're going to close, I think it's Monday, November 2nd, I think is what that is. And I'm going to start out by saying best case scenario could be late May. And I hate to give best case scenarios, but on a project, when you got that much traffic that uses, I'll throw that out there. But realistically, it very easily could roll into summertime. We'll find out what the winter weather is, we'll find out what the river levels do, and we'll see how that affects us as we move forward. So, I'm gonna keep throwing that out there, and for people to take notice. They'll notice once the signs go up also, but other than that, moving along, ditching and finishing up some pension jobs and blading and culverts and just trying to get stuff done. Winter's right around the corner, so.
Do you remember off the top of your head what the low bid was for that Flint River Bridge? Was it 2.3 million, something like that, 2.4? If
2.8.
The estimate was 2.8 or 2.9. I wanna say it was 2.3, but I'd have to double check that, Tom.
check and give me a call when you find it, because we've got to get a line of credit lined up.
I'll have it for you before the end of the day, before the end of the meeting.
Like I work that fast.
I didn't say that.
Brian, are you still pinching dishes?
We are no longer pinching, we are actually just putting the final layer of rock on pinched roads now. So we got just shy of 10 miles done today, or done this week, or this year I should say, and so we're putting that last layer of rock on, and we are done with pinching for the season.
Bob, you ought to ask Brian for a short definition of pinching after the meeting.
Here he did.
No,
Okay,
I've got a
good.
good one that now I can use it.
Okay, good.
So, it's exciting stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Jared Lassiter, Land Use.
Good morning. We're planning to have a zoning commission meeting next Monday to follow up on the ordinance, subdivision and zoning ordinance update, get some feedback from them on their initial review of the document. We've actually looked at a couple of additional issues related to that more in depth, got some feedback from land use professional with Iowa State, and as a result of that, we are looking at, I haven't discussed the specifics of this with Zach, but looking at doing a work session with you guys probably next week if possible, sometime soon at least, to discuss a couple of specific issues related to that and get your thoughts on that moving forward. But other than that, nothing particularly noteworthy. We have a couple of subdivisions, one on the agenda today, one out for review, and then I think we'll probably have a few more in the coming weeks for minor subdivisions.
Thank you, Jared. Lisa Shaver, Des Moines County Attorney.
We're busy. We have a trial going today. We have trials going every week from now until Christmas. Even right now, including the week of Christmas and the week of Thanksgiving. So we're busy. We're also getting ready to do our crossover on the data management system to Carpel, which is our cloud-based system. So in the event we ever have to work from home like we did with COVID, we'll have a little bit better way to do that. That's about it. Working on our AV project for the courtroom to give it more COVID-friendly. That's about it.
Thanks, Lisa.
I would think you'd make that more COVID unfriendly. I would think you'd make that more COVID unfriendly.
Well, right now, we just know that this is the way it's gonna be for a while. And so we have to figure out how to accommodate that as best we can, especially because we have a couple of homicide trials coming up in the next few months. And we would like to have that courtroom equipped so that everybody can actually see the surveillance videos and hear the interviews and the witnesses. That's hit or miss where we're at right now.
Thanks, Lisa. Mike Johnstone, Des Moines County Sheriff.
Good morning, Tom. I'd just like to remind everybody that this is harvest season and to keep an eye out for your friendly local farmers out there trying to do their job, get the crop out. A lot of big equipment on the roads right now, moving around trying to get the crop out while they have a chance. So give them a little extra space, be patient around them. Sometimes, of course, towards dusk, you might see some equipment out there with not all the lights on them. So just be really careful around them, give them extra time, give them extra space. And we'll get through it and they'll get their crop out, which is very important right now. So, but we're starting to see a lot of equipment out. And of course it's dry, so you're starting to see a lot of dust in the air and those kind of things too. Reduced visibilities, those kind of things. So it's important to just be very careful around the farmers at this time. Also, we're having some rural burglaries during the day, so we would encourage everybody to keep an eye out in their neighborhoods for any suspicious vehicles they might see, people that should not be in your areas, people that are unknown to you, happen to be cruising your gravel roads and some of the blacktops. Be sure to let us know so we can check it out, get a plate if you can, and we'll run them down and figure out what they're doing. So starting to see a few of those, which is unusual, but it's important we alert everybody to it. Make sure your buildings and sheds are locked down, your vehicles don't have keys in them as they sit in front of your house or in front of your barn, and make sure that everything is secured up when you leave your house.
Any particular part of the county, or can you share that with us?
Yeah, actually, we're having trouble on the west end towards Danville, up in that area there. Rural Danville is where we're seeing a lot of that. We encourage people to put security cameras up on their homes or have deer cams out, those kind of things in their driveways and different locations on their property that would view, the access areas to their home. Those help out a lot when we go investigate a crime. We like to be able to, review those videos, and they've been a tremendous help in the past. So we would encourage everybody to put some kind of video surveillance on their homes so we can review that later in the event that something does happen. But not a widespread problem, not a huge problem, but we are having somebody out there that's doing some burglaries. So we'd like to catch up with those guys. So secure your buildings, your property, and your vehicles, and let us know if you see anything unusual.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Krista Poggenmiller, Local Health.
Good morning. We continue to be busy. Our numbers in Des Moines County have gone up. Our current number of positive cases is 1,020 with 709 recovered cases, and that makes our rolling 14-day percentage at 11.2. The Board of Health is very concerned about those numbers, and at their Board of Health meeting last week, they adopted a position statement that I'd like to read regarding mass gatherings. The Des Moines County Board of Health position statement regarding large public events in 2020 in Des Moines County during the pandemic public health crisis of COVID-19. Des Moines County Board of Health has the responsibility to address the health concerns of Des Moines County citizens and is taking the position that large-scale events planned in 2020 are ill-advised. Based on known evidence of how COVID-19 spreads among mass gatherings of people, along with high risks associated with community spread of COVID-19 from travelers coming in from highly infectious areas across the United States. The board believes that harmful health impact on our county citizens attending these events could be substantial. Increases in COVID-19 related illnesses and even death could result and affect our population health for months to come. The Board of Health recommends canceling of these events out of concern for health and safety of all community members. Should these events move forward, the Board of Health strongly encourages citizens to protect themselves and others and avoid mass gatherings and crowds while the virus is still highly active and spreading across the United States. We are seeing that hospitals currently our area hospital is still okay with COVID cases, however, that it is starting to have an impact nationwide as far as the capacity for hospitals to keep having COVID cases. And that brings us, obviously we're coming into flu season, and so the concern is between COVID and flu that this would be obviously extremely challenging for the healthcare systems to be able to continue to meet the needs for the communities. So with that also, we are doing a drive-through flu clinic tomorrow at St. Mary's from 10 to 3. People can come through who have Medicaid. We have a limited number of free vaccines for eligible people from the age of 19 to 65. We also take vaccine for children, Medicare, and we take insurance, as well as people who want a private pay. It's $35 for the vaccine. We definitely encourage people to get the flu vaccine this year. Again, really trying to help, reduce the challenges is going to be for the healthcare system. Also, with our increased numbers for the county, we really want to encourage people to do the social distancing, good hand hygiene, as well as remember, if you're sick, regardless of what it is, it's important that people stay home because it's very difficult to tell if it's the flu or if it's COVID. And so until the symptoms are very similar. So we want to make sure people do stay home and then if necessary, get the testing.
Dumb question. Is it possible to have the COVID and the flu at the same time simultaneously?
I don't know why it wouldn't be possible. I think it definitely could be. I think that's one of the challenges they're worried about this fall.
Okay.
Because they're different viruses, so I think you could easily be exposed to both.
So the drug they gave the president, is that readily available?
I don't know. I know remdesivir is one that we use locally here, as well as the dexamethasone. I know that the hospitals is using that, but I think there's a new one that, and I'm not sure that I think it may be FDA trialed, but I don't know that I've not heard that be used local.
Thanks, Krista. We got anybody on?
First one I have on here is Chris Lee, Conservation.
Chris Lee, Conservation.
Good morning. Not a lot to discuss today. Our campground was real busy this last week up at Big Hollow. I think our camp host said she turned away more than 30 campers. This would have been our Halloween event weekend, which we had canceled, and I know a lot of folks were still planning on coming for that to celebrate that weekend. So busy weekend for us, but everything went well with that. We will be working on closing the parks this month. We'll be shutting water off to most of our parks and kind of picking things up. Generally, we close things up at the end of October. But like I said, if the weather stays warm, we will leave Big Hollow open. We will shut the water off after it looks like we're at risk of any length of freezing. But we've got a lot of requests from folks wanting to make reservations into November. But after October 31st, we don't take reservations anymore. It's just a first come, first serve. Generally, I would have to believe that you won't have any trouble getting a site in November, although I'm not sure we won't have people camping in Thanksgiving. So we've had some questions about that. And then other than that, just I sent a field tour poll out to you guys, I think last week. If you haven't filled that out, please do that so we can get that tour and work session scheduled for later this month. And that's it.
Hey, Chris, how about
Yeah.
Geode? Have you heard anything on Geode?
Just not directly from them, but we actually drove out there yesterday to check on it, and the contractor isn't there working. I heard that they only had about 2 weeks worth of work left to do, and I heard that they were supposed to be getting started last week, so I would think they're getting close to wrapping up. We did see a lot of semis coming in with riprap, so they're doing the shoreline armoring now, and that's usually something you would do kind of towards the end of the project. And so if the weather stays decent here through this month, from what I had heard, the contractor said that they would be done with the inlet work this month, and then I believe that's really all they have to do so that they can close that up and let that start filling, and that can start filling up next month. Now, this is all just, kind of secondhand information, so I don't know if that's completely true, but we did see them working out there yesterday, so that's good. As far as the campground out there, I did find out that they had a water problem, so they still have half the campground closed, and that's due to a water line issue. When they ran the new water lines, I'm told one of them wasn't sized properly, and so if they turn the water onto that second half of the campground, it will affect the pressure in all the rest of the campground. So until they can remedy that, I think that's why that back half of the campground is remaining closed, as I understand it anyway. But that's all done through the DNR, that's a state park, and so, like I said, this is all secondhand information.
Thanks, Chris.
You bet.
Janelle Nally Longquist, Des Moines County Treasurer.
Janelle Nally Longquist, Des Moines County Treasurer.
Good morning. We just continue to be busy, and other than that, I don't really have anything new to report.
Thanks, Janelle.
You're welcome.
Anybody? And Krista already addressed COVID-19. Correspondence?
I have none. I have none.
I have none. Proceed to discussion and vote. We have a DESCOM, somewhere here, 28E agreement. Hold on. Anyway, I'm sure you guys, we got this emailed early last week, so I'm sure you guys had a chance to look over a 2080 agreement with DESCOM. I noticed this 2080 still refers to the call center as being housed at the Burlington Police Department. Anyway, the board obviously can't approve any 2080 until the county attorney signs off on it. And that department is currently covered up with a backlog of cases in the newly opened court system. As you're also aware, the county recently offered to fund 100% of DESCOM in exchange for a majority of the DESCOM control board. That was unacceptable to the current DESCOM board. They countered, as written into the 2080 before you, with a proposal for 100% county funding and having the Des Moines County Emergency Management Commission serve as the DESCOM control board. There's no sense in the county attorney spending time on going through this 2080 agreement, which is predicated on that counter proposal, until the Board of Supervisors decides on that proposal. So what this board needs to do is either accept or refuse the proposal, which that proposal is the gist of this 2080. If we accept that proposal, I believe the matter is closed and all that remains is for each entity to sign off on a corrected copy of the 2080. If we don't accept the proposal, the entire matter remains unresolved. So,
I think this is gonna be our best bet. I would make the motion that we accept the proposal.
Second.
Terry?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have a, yeah, well, the 2080 agreement, like I said, I know there's some clerical errors in it, so we'll have the, when you get a chance, you can go through that.
We'll be happy to do that.
We understand that you're busy, so do we need to table the actual 2080 since we,
I think you would table the actual agreement until we have the chance to review it, make any corrections.
okay.
And my understanding is it's not grammatically correct, there are some just factual things that are different. It looks as though it was a cut and.
I just noticed one thing as I went through it,
Yeah, when you refer to the call centers being at the police department, and that has not been the case for quite some time, so.
Yes.
Obviously, there are some factual things that may be wrong with it, as well as other grammatical errors. I would advise the board to sign off on something unless we know that it's correct. But,
In other words, we table it until it can be.
Yeah. so we can all come to
So-
an agreement and make sure that all the proper changes have been made.
Okay. Anybody want to make that motion?
Motion to table.
All right, second.
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes.
Does that bring the other table off, the other motion off the table?
No, we can leave it sit there. The way I understand, you don't ever have to address a table, it can be tabled forever. Wouldn't that be true? The old 2080 they sent last week?
Yeah, that we can shove that one off.
Yeah. We have a resolution and final plat for the key guy.
Well, first I figure I'd address the elephant in the room and the kind of a distinctive name there. It's actually pronounced Ikigai. That is according to a, was mentioned in the first 30 seconds of a TED Talk I watched about that to get some perspective on where the name came from. And just a quick definition here from online. Ikigai is a Japanese concept that means a reason for being. And it refers to having a direction or purpose in life, that which makes one's life worthwhile, and towards which one makes a spontaneous and willing actions, giving them satisfaction and a sense of meaning. So now we know the background of where that name came from. Now we can
rename Secondary Road.
we can go on to the specifics of the subdivision here. So this is a one-lot minor subdivision located off Highway 99. Just north of Burlington. It's a little over 2 acres, and it's an existing residential area around there. There's essentially an existing lot that's being split in half, and then the undeveloped southern half of the property, which will be split off, will be developed for a house for a relative of the current owner of the property. So if you look at the plat, it includes there's a couple of easements. One is actually for a private road called 118th Street, which provides access to the Sylvan Heights Second Edition. There's several lots along that cul-de-sac, and then there's also a separate 20-foot easement to the back of the property for a couple of lots to the north and south along the bluff. So that those easements are both contained on the plat to continue going forward, so that those owners continue to have access to their properties. This is within the 2-mile review area of the city of Burlington. They have reviewed it, and it was approved by the council at their meeting last week. Also, that means it's within the zoning, 2-mile zoning area, so any home Construction would be, require a permit from my department as well. In terms of the resolution, I did include a couple of conditions on there. One is related to a comment from Secondary Roads that the Lot 1 will need to use 118th Street for driveway access rather than having a separate entrance off of 99, which, as I discussed it with the subdivider, and that was their intent all along, to access it from that side street, so that would not be an issue, but figured just put it in there for the record. And as well, since there is going to be a home construction involved with it, we've included the standard condition about obtaining a wastewater treatment system permit before construction, and then ensuring that that's been installed before the home is occupied. So with that, we recommend approval of Ikigai Heights with those two conditions.
I will so move.
I will second.
You?
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes, we'll get all these signed up.
Here's hoping approving that subdivision helps give you some meaning in life. And I know that how things have been going this year. I think we can all use some Ikigai.
I'm sure we all share that thought.
After the meeting, I'll share a story with an exchange student from Japan that my son had.
Yeah.
It's well, I'll go ahead and tell him now.
Okay.
He came up to our house and he walks in and he said, Ohio. I said, no, this is Iowa. He said, Ohio. And I said, this is Iowa. And my son said, Dad, that's the way they say hello in Japanese.
We have a personnel action for the county attorney. Haley Hamilton, clerk 1, an 18-month step increase to $34,584.39, effective October 15th.
Move approved.
Second. Terry?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have reports. We have the clerk of courts report of fees collected for September 2020. The recorder's report of fees collected for September 2020. And the recorder's report of fees collected for August 2020. These reports will be on file at the auditor's office and available for public review. We have minutes for the regular meeting of October 6th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
And
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. Any other business?
I have none.
No.
Future agenda items? Committee reports?
Do not have any meetings.
I had 2 Zoom meetings, I missed both of them.
I attended the Des Moines County Emergency Medical Services Advisory Board. I believe that was the initial meeting, wasn't it?
Yep.
Anyway, so the state's trying to, correct me if I get any of this wrong, the state's trying to standardize the emergency medical services system across the state, and the establishment of this advisory board is one of the first steps. Debbie?
Yes.
Matt's a charter member as
Yeah.
well. And I also attended a meeting of the County Safety Committee. We discussed what was learned from last week's fire drill, and we also discussed the road crew safety, which has been mentioned here before. Apparently, even the county, the closer road crews get to the city, the less friendly traffic is to them. People are known to reach out, take a swat at a road worker, or try to maybe clip him with the mirror. I can't imagine, but anyway, and tomorrow's drive-through flu clinic was also discussed, so that's all I have. Public input. Due to limited attendance due to the COVID-19 and the fact that this is live streamed, anyone with questions may email the Board of Supervisors at board@dmcounty.com, that's BOARD@dmcounty.com, or call 319-753-8203, extension 4. That's 319-753-8203, extension 4. We will be taking calls or emails for 2 minutes. And that time, is there anybody, public comment from?
I have a question for Jared. You had an opening on a board.
The zoning commission, yes.
Did you, have you got any feelers out?
We've explored a few options. One, it sounded like she was considering it, but it determined she was too busy to want to commit to that at this time. I think there was another one that was a similar situation, and then a couple more where I just didn't get responses back. So unfortunately, it's somewhat difficult to number one, actually get a hold of someone that might be interested, and then actually, once you get that far, to find somebody that actually is willing to commit to that. So it's ongoing. We have 7 members, so we would be able to have a quorum if 4 attend a meeting. So I think we're safe for the time being. It would be ideal to get that filled, but it's a challenge to find interested people. So.
Thanks, Jerry.
We're open to suggestions. We have a few options that we're looking into, but anybody has any ideas, it's welcome.
It's tough everywhere for rural counties everywhere in the state to try to fill those boards.
Mm-hmm.
There's a handful of people willing to do that. There's only so many people when there's more boards, so.
Right.
Kind of a thankless job.
And you only hear from people when you've done something that they don't like. Any other public comment?
One
Matt?
thing. So last week was Fire Prevention Week, and pretty much everything we normally do was a no-go because of COVID. No going to the schools, no doing public education, tours, door-to-door smoke detector canvassing that we've done the last few years with the Elks Club. We couldn't do that. So in lieu of that, they set up a drive-through smoke detector giveaway. And we did that last Saturday from 9 to 11:30, and we're doing it again this Saturday from 9 to 11:30, 9:30 to 11:30. Right there across from Central Fire Station at the Elks. You just drive up, they have it coned off. You can drive up, they'll just give you a smoke detector for you to put in yourself, or you can get the smoke detector and then request that somebody come out and install that for you, so. Or a home inspection, or come and put batteries in your smoke alarms, whatever, but we're just not doing the door-to-door, so if somebody needs a smoke detector, just come on down there, they're free. Thanks to the Elks Club, they do the fundraising for that, so.
What's your hours?
That's a great,
9:30 to 11:30.
9 to 11:30, 9:30 to 11.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, if anybody just calls us, we always can come out and put the detectors in.
Thank you, and the Elks Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
great community service.
It is, that's great. With an eye, we're adjourned. We are adjourned. We have a, we ready, Terry?
Yep.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You wanna grab that door if you
You
would?
want that door closed?
Thanks, Brian. We have a work session with the county auditor and county attorney regarding the ordinance readopting existing county ordinances. This is required every 5 years, and I suspect the county attorney is going to explain this to us.
Basically, I'm here to discuss the criminal code portion of the county ordinances. We've had significant changes in the state criminal laws, and some of the ordinances reflect state law. And so I just kind of wanted to go through some changes that I think we should consider with amendments. We'll just start on page 1, where we define a violation of the ordinance as a simple misdemeanor. I believe as currently set, the fines are $65 to $625.
Elisa, which ordinance are you referring to?
I'm
This-
referring
just
to
the-
the amended ordinance.
Or is that
I
6?
neglected to hand these out. so,
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Because what I gave them is just what our last 5-year one is, so. But we need to amend.
Yeah,
Ordinance.
well, that's their choice, they can leave them as is, but I do know that under the state code now, fines for simple misdemeanors are $105 to $855.
What are they in our ordinances?
65 to 625. That was the old simple misdemeanor amounts under state code. Those just recently were changed and became effective, I believe, July 15.
By simple misdemeanors, what are we talking about?
Simple misdemeanors, well, all the violations of the county code are considered simple misdemeanors. Simple misdemeanors under state code are things like public intoxication, disorderly conduct, interference with official acts. Anything that is punishable by a fine now of $105 to $855 or no more than 30 days in jail. So I didn't know if the county wanted to look, if the board wanted to look at raising those fines to be consistent. Basically what they did at the state level is they raised all the fines and lowered all the surcharges. So truly, for someone who's convicted of a simple misdemeanor or any crime, they're really not seeing a tremendous change in what they're going to owe, because
Where do the surcharges go?
you don't get
What's the difference?
those at the county level. The legislature enacted a bunch of new surcharges. I think they just called it the just general surcharge. Now it's called the crime services surcharge. And prior to July 15, it was 35%. So if you got a ticket for $100, you would automatically have a $35 surcharge added to that. Basically, that money goes to the state to kind of keep the whole system flowing. Well, what they did is they reduced the surcharge from 35 to 15%. And in turn, to make up for lost revenues, they turn around and raise the fines.
Who gets the fines?
For the ordinance violation, we would.
So the county, so in other words, the county would get more money and the state would get less, I can't imagine. That's hard
Well,
to figure doing that.
they refigured how, under the state code, the surcharges are done. Now it's, you get a standard percentage versus, or regardless, it's very weird. I have the code.
Yeah. let's
Yeah,
try that.
basically, for the general surcharge, again, they reduced it significantly, and then there used to be, I think, a formula for how they decided which agencies got it, because the local municipality would get a percentage, the county would get a percentage, the courts got a percentage. They reconfigured all of that. They claim you're all gonna get the same amount of money. We'll see how that goes. And then there are additional surcharges other than the general surcharge that people, a lot of that depends upon what crime you're convicted of. So for instance, if you're convicted of a theft, we used to have what was called the law enforcement surcharge, was of $125. They did away with that one, but they created some new ones. So the general surcharge became the crime services surcharge. They also reduced court costs by $5, from $60 to $55. They created a new domestic or sexual abuse crime-related surcharge. And again, this is for people who are convicted under the state code.
And so the surcharges go to the state. What about the, when you said they added, what was the other one?
Oh, they added a whole bunch of surcharges.
But when they lowered court costs, so where do court costs go?
Court costs go to the judicial department.
So
They
go
run
to-
the judicial, state judicial department.
Okay.
And then they found all sorts of ways to, there's just a lot going on at the state level, which I don't know how much sense it makes. For instance, they reduce court costs, but also if a defendant can establish that they don't have the reasonable ability to pay court costs, they can waive those. The defendant has to fill out a financial affidavit, we have hearings, we go through the whole 9 yards on that. So it's going to be interesting to see how it ultimately affects the judicial department's budget by what the legislature has done. But for our purposes, I didn't know if the board was interested in bumping those up so that they're all consistent. I think for criminal defendants, it makes it less confusing if they know what the fine's gonna be. My guess is that if the county ordinances stayed lower, the local municipalities would never charge under a county ordinance anyway, because the fines would be higher in the state.
If they didn't charge under a county ordinance and there was any jail time, they'd have to pay for the jail, wouldn't they?
The way jail fees work now, again, they changed that. Jail fees used to be, under the state code, part of restitution. They've eliminated jail fees as part of restitution. The way I read the code is decidedly different than the way some others are reading it. The way I read the code, the sheriff's office actually has to do a small claims action every time they want jail fees. Other people disagree with me, but that's the way I read the code, and that's not the way they're doing it, but I'll leave that for them. They don't come to my office, so I don't generally worry about it unless they have a question for me. I read it very differently than other agencies do. I read it consistent with all the other county attorneys. So we'll see what happens when it goes to, it'll ultimately go to Des Moines and someone, those 7 folks will tell us exactly how it reads.
The judges are always right. It doesn't matter what the county attorneys think.
Well, and again, I think that was the gist of it, I think, because I attended a meeting, the county attorneys tend to agree on this, that there needs to be a small claims action filed. Clerk's offices and sheriff's offices are seeing it differently. At some point, it will be litigated, and the 7 people in black up in Des Moines will tell us exactly how that statute reads.
Those costs, how do I want to say this? You made mention to not having the ability to pay. And if they're out committing a crime, awful lot of those people don't have the ability to pay. And so where do you recommend that we put those fines?
The way the state legislature divided up financial obligations and how the courts are supposed to address them, victim restitution is seen completely separate. It is victim restitution. A defendant will always be ordered to pay that in whole. It is the first thing to be paid. Next, they call it Category A restitution, which consists of fines and the surcharges. Again, they have a whole litany of new surcharges. So that is considered Category A restitution. We've never called it restitution before. It was fines, it was surcharges, that's what we called them. But now they've tried to divvy it up. And then there's Category B restitution, which they eliminated the jail fees out of that. It used to be part of that. Now it's any reimbursements that need to be made to the Crime Victims Assistance, or I believe they call it the Crime Victims Compensation Program. So a lot of fines and surcharges actually go to fund that program. So that's the program where victims of crime who have sustained some sort of pecuniary damage, they either have medical bills, lost wages, property damage, Once the defendant is convicted, they can actually petition to that fund, and that fund reimburses them what they're out. So long as it's not been previously covered by insurance. So Bob, if you're in a car accident and there's $1,500 worth of damage, but you have a $250 deductible, and clearly the other person is at fault, they were charged with the crime, convicted of it, you can actually petition to the Crime Victim Compensation Program to get that $250 deductible reimbursed. It won't pay for what the insurance paid for, but if you have an out-of-pocket expense, it will pay that. That has historically been funded. There's some funding for it in the state budget, but a lot of it has come out of fines, and the surcharges have funded that program. Now we're considering that Category B restitution, as well as, for instance, if there's an OWI accident that requires more than the typical one officer to do an OWI stop. So say there's an accident out on Danville Road, it requires pretty much the entire sheriff's office to report, which normally they would not do, but they're there as an emergency responder because of the accident itself. They can actually ask for restitution to pay the costs of, if they had to call Corey Whitaker in, for instance, they could actually ask for restitution from the defendant to pay those additional costs. Court costs are considered Category B restitution. Court-appointed attorney fees are Category B restitution. The medical assistance program, which is part of the Crime Victim Compensation Program, all of those are now considered Category B restitution. And so with Category A, the court can always suspend fines. They've always had the ability to suspend fines. There's question now between judges of whether they still have that authority or not. But for right now, they assume they can. But for Category B restitution, which can be quite big, depending on the nature of the crime, the defendant can file an application to waive all of that, and they have to do a financial affidavit. It's much more lengthy than the one they do to get a court-appointed attorney, much more detailed. And then we have a hearing to determine whether they have the reasonable ability to pay. That has not been interpreted by the courts yet because it's still fairly new. I tend to differ on what that means versus the public defender's office, for instance. I tend to believe if you have the ability to work, you have the reasonable ability to pay. Courts are disagreeing with me for the most part here in Des Moines County. But for instance, for someone who's on SSI.
And what grounds are they disagreeing with you on?
They're granting it. Basically, they'll come in and say, I don't have a job, I'm unemployed, I have all these other bills, I don't have the reasonable ability to pay. Our office's status, our office's kind of general protocol policy is, if you have the ability to work, you have the reasonable ability to pay.
I can live with that.
I figured you would agree with me. We do take a different approach if it's someone, for instance, who's on SSI. We have a lot of our.
That doesn't mean you're boring.
Pardon?
That doesn't mean you're boring.
Wouldn't be the first people to turn the lights on me. And so we have that situation, so that what it's actually doing is it's giving our investigator a lot more to do. Because what we're actually doing when we have those hearings is we're handing those financial affidavits to our investigator to confirm some of that information. And then we're having to have additional hearings. It's just I'm not quite sure what the plan was there. So it'll be interesting to see how they like it in 2 or 3 years when they've revisited their budgets. Again, I don't necessarily agree that we need to have criminal defendants so far in debt that they can't get out. But I think to me, reasonable ability to pay, I think the legislature had something in mind when they enacted that. Because we've had that for a while based on a court case. And I think the legislature came in and tweaked that court case because I think they tended to disagree a little bit with the Supreme Court. Because it used to be just basically they would walk in and say, I can't pay this. And the judges would go, oh, okay. And I think the fact that the legislature is requiring them to do these financial affidavits to have a hearing. The burden is on them to prove that they don't have the reasonable ability to pay. To me, that, again, this is my interpretation as a legislature saying, that needs to be the exception rather than the rule. But that's not the way that at least our local judges are seeing it. So yeah, they just pretty much threw all of the jail fees out of there. And basically what they said is they need to do those under a separate action. How they're doing it now, again, we differ in process, so we'll see how that works. I think the legislature was very clear and that they wanted there to be some due process. I don't think that's necessary. I think the process here in Des Moines County is not necessarily what the legislature intended. So at some point, there'll be some litigation and we'll let other folks
I
determine.
bring up this question, I talked to Judge Lichty, it's been 2 or 3 years ago, I suppose, but I was comparing Henry County Jail's cost compared to ours. And he says, well, I have that feeling, of course, I was pretty happy with ours. And he says, well, you can't get blood out of turnip. It's always made me think, when I think about this stuff, is, and what you said there, the ability to pay. You know, there's only so much, you can only beat somebody so much. Then they give
But
up.
it's amazing, I know our collections program, we just had someone call last week. Apparently you got a job where their driver's license meant so much, they all of a sudden had the ability to put $13,000 worth of delinquent financial obligations on a credit card to get it paid. So I'm a believer that, again, I don't like the idea of debtors' prisons, those sorts, but I think personally, if you have the ability to work, you have the ability to pay those costs. And they're the last things that get paid. I also agree that the victims who are out money, out of their pocket because of a crime that was committed against them, should be the first ones to see that money. But that's the way it's always been. So they didn't necessarily change the hierarchy of how things get paid out, but I think we've almost made it a little bit too easy. But we'll see what the folks in black have to say about what the legislature said.
Okay, Lisa, so that said, and all of the changes in misdemeanor fees and all of that stuff, instead of going through every ordinance to figure out where we have that, is that something that we can address?
Well, actually, the way it is the first page of Ordinance 6 just basically says, if you violate the ordinance, it's a simple misdemeanor, and these are the fines. So that would take care of all of the fines. We wouldn't have to go through each one separately. So it's just a matter of whether you want to do that.
And you say that right now the fines range from $65 to
$65 to
$605.
$625.
$625, and then it would go from $105 to $800 or $850 or something like that. What is, so if somebody's convicted, the judge can fine you anywhere from $100 to $800. That's just on his and say, well, this particular offense is more egregious.
Yeah, and it may be, I know one of the things with our office, so for instance, say it's a public intoxication under the county code. You know, we've seen that they have 2 or 3 of them. Obviously, the fines are gonna get more stringent, so we could go all the way up to the max. Or if it's a doctor, a $65 fine doesn't mean much to a doctor the way it does to somebody who is working a minimum wage job at McDonald's. We may ask for larger fines. Sometimes we do ask for jail. I'm not gonna say we don't.
You have a recommendation?
I think it's less confusing for defendants, because then it's just less confusing for them. They're already getting comfortable with the fact the fines are going up a little bit. And again, I think if the municipal agencies, whether it's the sheriff's office, West Burlington or Burlington, if there are similar codes for here and there, they're gonna turn around and charge the state code because they know they can get more money out of them. It's just really whether you want that uniformity. I assumed, given that you had used those state parameters before, that you would want to remain consistent with those.
I think we should remain consistent with the state themselves.
Yeah, here too.
the first time we talked about this, I was initially wasn't in favor of it, but you swayed me, so I agree that for uniformity, and like you said, they've changed the costs and this and that, so.
Yeah, I mean, they got busy there during COVID with some criminal stuff. There is the disorderly conduct statute. We still have the alternative for loud and raucous noise. That has actually been declared unconstitutional.
Loud and raucous noise,
Yeah.
really?
There's
Wish I'd known that when I was in college.
Well, there was actually a federal case that came about, Miano v. Miller, back in September of last year, where, whether you agree, disagree, or have your own opinion, basically what the court said, they put an intent element into that particular provision. And so if you're loud and raucous, what may be loud and raucous to you and me mean the same thing, and I think you're fine, but it really offends Jim. How are you supposed to know what loud and raucous is? Because it means different things to different people. They kind of used a vagueness, the vagueness doctrine, in that it doesn't really have the ability to put the noisemaker, for lack of a better word, on notice of whether they're so loud that they're going to be disturbing of other people.
And you mentioned disorderly conduct and public intoxication, I imagine they always quite often run together. Do they usually get two charges or just pick one?
It kind of depends on how they're behaving. Now that the loud and raucous part has been eliminated, we'll usually just charge them as public intox. Because again, the more intoxicated they are, the more loud and raucous they tend to be. But since we no longer have the ability to charge that, we don't see that as often, unless they get to fighting.
Sometimes they do, can I be arrested for
Both
public intoxication?
Yeah, they have
and
different
disorderly
elements.
conduct? Oh, okay.
Yep, you can be disorderly without being drunk, and you can drunk in public, and you can be drunk in public without being disorderly. So if you're like a real quiet, mild-mannered drunk, you're not necessarily committing disorderly conduct. And that used to be where we saw it generally, was they would get obviously drunk in public, and then they get really loud and obnoxious and start offending people, but now we don't have that ability. We do still sometimes see it if they're drunk in public and then get into a fight. Because the fighting part or violent behavior, that still exists.
The fight is disorderly conduct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are different provisions for disorderly. So originally it was fighting or violent behavior in a public place. So you could charge, if somebody gets drunk in a bar and then they get in a big bar fight, you can charge them with public intox and disorderly conduct. There was the loud and raucous noise, which we don't have anymore. Abusive epithets, we don't see very often, but it happens every once in a while. And then basically it's...
In other words, so if you go to a restaurant or something and call somebody a blankety so-and-so, blankety such and such, that's
disorderly conduct.
That's disorderly conduct, okay.
If it offends them and it's causing them a disturbance here. So yeah, I would recommend for the disorder, which I believe is 6G, just getting rid of subparagraph B, since it's been declared unconstitutional and
I
you can't
think
charge
let's
it
go
anymore.
along with what she said.
I agree with that, I would.
Well,
see-
so this is what we have to do every 5 years. It lists all of the ordinances in the county. And this is what we have to do every 5 years. So,
Could you just
do we need to do an amendment to 6?
Update all the-
And plus do that other one, so we'll be doing 2 ordinances at the same time?
Yep, we will definitely need to amend 6, because we just have some issues that we obviously can't have up there. And I think those are really the only, I did have a question on the animal control, or the animal,
No, the one we passed a couple years ago.
yeah. A severe injury, and I was just comparing it with serious injury. and this is just more of a question on my part, I'm assuming that the way you've defined severe injury was based on information from vets, that this is what you would see from a dog bite versus what we define as serious injury in the state code.
As I recall, that most of that wording was brought to us from other ordinances and other counties or municipalities. Originally, it had all sorts of animals, and then we just kind of peeled away the other animals, so it just applied to dogs. Is that what your memory is?
That's what I remember on it, because we had that problem with the dogs, you know, and then the one lady come in where the dog attacked the daughter, you know, out of the.
Oh, yeah.
And,
attack the livestock.
yeah, I got the livestock, and then the girl got her face bit by the neighbor's dog.
I think
That's more common, I think, with that one, the two neighbors arguing about the dog.
Yeah,
That's more common than
then the livestock.
what happened up there.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
that was severe, but the language came,
Okay.
was brought to us by the county attorney at that time, that she had adopted from other ordinances from other.
Yeah, I was just
Other
curious where the
localities.
definition had come from,
I-
because
I-
some of them were just unusual things that, serious injury for, in the state criminal code is, any protracted loss of I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. But the one that threw me out was like the muscle or tendon tears, joint injuries, so I didn't know if those were like specific from a vet that said these are the things we're most likely to see.
I don't know where, I don't think any of us know where it originally came from. It came from other ordinances or laws in other communities.
Because I think that was the dog's injury upon the human, so that wouldn't come from
Yeah, no, I'm just
That
saying,
would come
but the
from
language
that.
from that, for that ordinance came from other ordinances.
other ordinances, yeah.
That wasn't anything that,
I think we had both of them going on at the same time when that animal and the little girl got bit.
Well, the girl was the granddaughter of the person that had the
Well,
wild dogs, but
yeah.
then there was a lady in here
Yeah,
that had
that's
her
what I'm-
son, it was her
It
son
was her
that was
son.
hit by the
Yeah.
neighbor's
Yeah,
dog.
that's what I'm talking about, the neighbor's dog got her.
so, but anyway, so if that's something is that something?
And those
you
are really the
change?
only changes that I think are necessary. There's a few of them in there that are always subject to some constitutional challenges if we ever get to that level, but if
And we-
nobody's challenged them as of yet, I wouldn't be too worried about
Do
it.
we want to have Lisa bring us a different definition? Would you change the word or the definition?
And I'm not necessarily sure I would change it, I just was curious where it came from, because
Okay.
it lists some
Okay.
different things that we don't see in the definition section from the state code. And I'll review them and look at them together to see if maybe there's more we want to add to it.
Okay.
Because I know one of the things where when we charge a crime that involves a serious injury, one of the things that we will rely on heavily is protracted loss of use of a major body part or body organ. Because you don't always get a broken bone, you don't always, but that, it's kind of all encompassing. So if, somebody gets bit in the eye, well, they have their eye covered for however long, that could be thrown in there, where it might not necessarily fit your definition. So I can see if there's pieces of the state criminal code definition that would fit in well, and then we can always add those in, just to.
Yeah,
But where we were so alarmed up there was those dogs get in and chasing livestock, maiming, really tearing cattle apart, and then chasing them through fences out onto the road, which could cause very serious injury to public. And we didn't really, I don't think we thought we had an ordinance that we could use.
But the sheriff said we didn't.
Yeah, and I think all in all, it's great. Just that particular, I was a little, there's some other language you could use that would make that severe injury a little more expansive, so that the ordinance would cover more situations.
Sure. Once you bring us a different definition, it might not hurt if we look at it.
That'd be fine. Yeah, just as long as we don't lose the tool.
Yeah, the protracted loss protracted loss of use of a bodily organ or appendage, or I'm trying to remember the words. But that protracted loss of use, I think, would give you a little bit more broad of a swath of things that would fall under that particular portion of the ordinance. Because everything in here is very specific, where that's kind of general. And so we've, for instance, we had a case I tried, the one down in Van Buren before COVID. He broke the kid's hand. Now ultimately 2 other people killed him, but for what we did, he broke his hand, so obviously he was gonna have a loss of use of that hand for however long a time it would have taken to heal had he survived the rest of the incident. It's a little bit broader, so it might give you a little bit more. Whereas this is so very specific, if you don't have those particular issues, then you're not necessarily gonna fit under the county ordinance.
Our goal was to have it just, nobody wanted a leash or anything like that, to have it focus on just
The injury,
severe,
yeah.
you know, something where
I think
it
maybe
really wasn't
broadening
public.
that definition of what a
Definitions,
severe injury is would
Right,
give
yeah.
us a little more
Yeah.
teeth in some cases.
Okay.
I think the one on little boy, when he got bit, didn't they decide that would have to be a civil matter because the boy went in the other person's yard? Yeah.
And sometimes that's just the way that works. But yeah, those are the major changes, so yeah, what I can do is just kind of redraft 6 with some of those changes. Changing the fines, removing the one provision alternative from disorderly conduct, and then getting a new definition for severe injury.
And then I'll work on the new readoption for 2020 and list all the ordinances in there.
I know that,
I didn't know if you had a different format that we could use or just use the same format.
I think the format is fine.
Okay. And I know on 6, it just has it lumped all together. I didn't know if we needed
Yeah, I would
to
maybe
spell
rename
out.
that, since there's more to it than just the drug
Yeah, because
paraphernalia
we've got
act.
what, A, B, and then maybe I or whatever, which one was repealed and.
There's 6, and then 6A is actually the drug paraphernalia act, and it goes all the way up through
And then just list everything that's underneath that.
HI is the last one, so, yeah, maybe just rename it rather than just being the drug paraphernalia act, I think. Because it obviously encompasses a lot more than that.
Well, there's been a lot of sub-ordinances added in there and stuff, so.
Yeah, so I think just one county criminal ordinances would be nice and easy and appropriate and would be more definitive of what's in there. As far as some of the others, I know, like I said, Jared said because there's just been a lot of change in the law.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of amendments to that one, so.
So I put Todd on that one.
Yeah, and that's one I didn't know if just to note it as what originally was and all amendments, and maybe just list and all amendments.
Yeah, I put Todd on that one, so we'll let him look at it. I just knew with the criminal, we just had some changes in the laws in the last year or two that I felt it was important to make sure that we included in the new criminal code.
So that means we'll have 2 ordinances to advertise and publish and prepare for the
Third time's a charm, isn't it?
readings.
I kinda like it with it all.
Thank you, Lisa.
No problem.
Lisa, off the subject.
We done with the work session, or are
We-
you continuing?
Yeah, we're done with the work session, yeah.
Okay. Then I can ask you an off-the-wall